Welcome back. So, we have been talking about ideas and minds and perception and the world that we live in, and we have been saying that in our mind we have a way of looking at the world that we live in, and that is what kind of constitutes or influences our thinking or our thoughts essentially. So, let me draw your attention to this nice film. It is a film called Powers of 10 by Charles and Ray Eames. What they have done is that they have taken pictures and magnified them 10 times. So, you zoom in, then you zoom in and then you zoom in again, and then you can see things at different levels of scale essentially. And it's a fascinating film. You can even see it as a slideshow on one of these sites, and it was even published as a book essentially. So, you could go through the pages and see that how when you focus on one hundredth of a scene. So, you have a scene, then you scale it down by 10. So, 10 this way, 10 that way. So, it will become 100, and how the world changes, how we see the world changes essentially. So, let us say we start with 1 meter. 1 meter is something typically which is well within our scope of perception. We can look at things which are 1 meter. So, for example, this table here on which my machine is kept is about 1.5 meters or something like that. So, I can imagine things like that. So, a typical door or table, the height of a child is 1 meter. Then if you look at things as a scale of 10 meters, then you can see that there are things like roads, small house or a tree essentially. 100 meters or 10 raised to 2 meters. So, you can think of a sprint track, a meadow, a pond or a skyscraper. 1 kilometer, 10 raised to 3 meters, the longest span of the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. 10 kilometers, typically the diameter of a large village or a small town. 100 kilometers, 10 raised to 5 meters, around the distance from Mandi to Manali in Himachal Pradesh. 10 raised to 6 meters, 1000 kilometers, the distance from Chennai to Pune for example is 1190 kilometers. 10 raised to 7 meters, roughly the diameter of earth. So, 10 times the distance from Chennai to Pune roughly speaking. 10 raised to 8 meters. So, we use the term megameters, not very common in popular language, but mega means 10 raised to 6. So, when you buy a camera which is 20 megapixel camera, you know that it is 20 million pixels. So, the diameter of Jupiter, which is about 10 times the more than 10 times the diameter of Earth. 10 raised to 11 meters, distance from Earth to Sun, then distance from Saturn to Sun, then the diameter of the solar system, then the diameter of the Milky Way, then a cluster of galaxies, that is called a yottameter, 10 raised to 24 meters. The visible universe, about 10 billion light years across. So, as we zoom out, we can see more and more of the universe and so on essentially. We can also zoom in from 1 meters. So, if you go down to 10 centimeters, we can see that things like a sunbird or a typical mango or a cell phone. Then 1 centimeter or 1 millimeter. Yeah, I do not have a centimeter there. So, 1 millimeter, a mustard seed. Then as you go zoom in more, you can look at pollen. So, sometimes you can see pollen particles floating in the air, I think, if there is a beam of sunlight. Then bacterium, these are things that we cannot see at this level of scale. Below, smaller than that is a virus, then the structure of the DNA, then the carbon atom's outer shell, then the electron cloud, then the carbon nucleus, then a proton, then quarks and gluons and so on. So, you can see our concepts, the things we talk about, they occur at different levels of scale essentially, but everything in the end is made up of a collection of some fundamental particles. Maybe they are quarks, maybe they are gluons, maybe they are strings. So, there is a string theory. Our perceptible universe, what we can see without having to strain ourselves, is in the range of pollen dust, pollen grains, which sometimes you can see in sunlight, to about 1 kilometer. So, you can see a distance of a few kilometers on a good day. And our thoughts have evolved by thinking of objects occurring at this scale of things or this size of things essentially. The rest of the things that we have understood is because of science. So, science has given us insights into things which are much larger than our perception, range of perception, and much smaller than our range of perception. So, not only is our range of perception bounded by size, that we can see things a few meters to maybe a kilometer across, but also by what kind of signals we can process. So, we can see in only the visible spectrum, where we can see the colors, and so we cannot see things which are in infrared or ultraviolet and things like that. Likewise, for sounds, we have a range of frequencies we can listen to. So, our experience of the world is kind of bounded by certain things, which means that our thoughts must have been influenced by what we can perceive essentially. But of course, science allows us to imagine other things. Each level of at each scale, at each level of magnification, there are concepts which have evolved essentially. So, if you look at these various professions which modern day humans work in, starting with subatomic particles to chemistry to cellular biology to psychology, economics, geography, astrophysics, astronomy, cosmology, each field of study has evolved a vocabulary to talk about things at that level of scale essentially. So, this tells us that the way that we represent things is influenced by what we want to do, what is the kind of reasoning we want to do, and we always represent things at an appropriate level of scale. Now, there is a question which has bothered many people over the last few centuries, is that if the mind is different from the body, and if thinking and matter are totally kind of disconnected from each other, how do they interact essentially? That was a question which was asked of Descartes when he said that the mind is different and the body is different. How does a thought control our action? So, if I decide to raise my hand, when I am thinking of raising my hand, how did my hand, which is a physical entity, actually gets raised essentially? So, that is a conundrum which people have faced for a long time. Douglas Hofstadter, in his book I Am a Strange Loop, which is a book I have been recommending quite a bit, he says that we operate with the concepts at our perceptible level. Our thoughts at this level cause the lower level activity that results in the action. So, there is what he calls as downward causality, that from the level that we think at to generating the nerve signals which will make my hand go up like this, is a process which he calls as downward causality essentially. So, he talks about epiphenomenon in computers essentially. Computers are man-made objects. We know how they operate. At the very core, the computer does only bit level operations. We know that computers operate with zeros and ones, and everything else is built upon that essentially. Everything else is built upon that, and everything can be explained by what is happening at that activity at the level of zeros and ones. So, if you have looked at computer organization, and if you have looked at, for example, assembly level programming, and if you have looked at machine code, you know that everything is happening at the level of zeros and ones. But of course, we do not like to see things at that level. How does a common user think of the machine? They do not even, of course, think about how it operates. They think of it as a music player, or a web browser, or a video player, or a word processor, or a keeper of facts, or an accounting spreadsheet. So, we tend to see the machines in from different perspectives. This has been called a universal machine by quite a few people, that the computer is a universal machine. It is a machine that can imitate any other machine. It can become a music player, it can become a cinema projector, whatever you want, it can become essentially. The question that we often want to ask is, can this machine become intelligent? So, Hofstadter says that yes, it can become intelligent if it can introspect and examine itself, and that is where the title of his book comes from. I am a strange loop, that I create this notion of I, and this notion of I can look at myself or look at my own being. So, it is a self referential this thing, and that has caused problems. We will see a little bit later in this course that how, if you were to devise logics which allow self reference, then they can create these kind of conundrums essentially. We will do that when we look at logics later. Hofstadter says that if a machine can introspect and examine itself, and it has access to an endless possible set of concepts, that you can represent different things, then you can make a machine that is intelligent essentially. Now, that has always been a problem essentially, in the sense, can machines ever think? Can they be intelligent? So, that is a issue which has been debated hotly over the years. Even now, for example, people have argued that what computers can do is not original thinking. They are not intelligent in the sense that they, for example, they may be able to learn a lot of things from a lot of data and kind of throw it back at us, but that does not mean that they are thinking machines essentially. Now, there are people who have also argued whether intelligence can occur outside the human brain essentially. So, Roger Penrose, the Nobel Prize winning mathematical physicist, was one of them. He said that there is something going on in our brains that is necessary for intelligence, but he said that we do not know what is that is going on. So, that is kind of a little bit of a conundrum in itself. So, other people have argued that can intelligence occur outside a context, that we are living in this world. So, we are contextualized by this world, and our intelligence is displayed in the manner in which we react to this world. Can we talk about an intelligence without a context? Can we say that this is an AI and then not specify as to in what domain is it active and what is it doing essentially? These are questions which are not the primary questions that we are here to investigate, but we are here to investigate that can we build machines which will be intelligent enough to model the environment that they are operating in, to reason about what they know about the environment, to make inferences, to make plans and to monitor their plans, and in that sense act in an autonomous way which we may or may not want to call intelligent. See, that is a question of definition, whether it is intelligent or not. So, we are not going to answer to try to investigate that question. We are going to try to see, our goal at this moment is to, in this course, is to see how can we represent, how can an intelligent agent represent the world it is operating in and reason with that essentially. We are not even talking about imagining what will happen if you do certain things, whatever the set of actions is available to you. I do teach that in a different course, I think. So, we will come back and talk about representation.